femme, Thaïs, la remplie de scandale, et par elle, l'enfer y gouverne les hommes. Que cette Thaïs, une prêtresse infâme, du culte de Vénus, jour, je l'avoue à ma honte, devant son sein maudit, je me suis arrêté. Mais Dieu m'a préservé de cette courtisane, et j'ai trouvé le calme en ce dessein. Le péché que j'aurais dû commettre, mon âme est troublée, la honte de Thaïs et le mal qu'elle fait me cause d'une peine amère, et je voudrais gagner à Dieu, oui, je voudrais gagner cet homme. Adieu, adieu, adieu. coupable, et puis je dois la plaindre. Et je la sauverai, Seigneur, donne-la moi, et je t'en rendrai pour la vie éternelle. Levez-vous tous, venez, venez. Ma mission en la ville maudite, il faut que je retourne. Dieu défend que Thaïs enfonce davantage dans le gouffre du mal, et c'est moi qu'il choisit pour la lui ramener. Mon fils, ne nous mêlons jamais aux gens du siècle. Voilà la sagesse éternelle. Esprit de lumière et de grâce, arme mon cœur pour le combat. Arme son cœur pour le combat. Fais-moi fort comme l'archange. Il fait le fort comme
Nathanael prays he will have the strength to save the soul of the infamous courtesan Thaïs. That was the opening scene of Massenet's Thaïs, featuring Gerald Finley as Nathanael and David Pitzinger as Palamon in this Metropolitan Opera performance from November. We're about to hear the second scene now. It takes place in Alexandria, where Nathanael arrives at the luxurious home of his old friend Nicias.
Nathanael has an aria railing out against this city, But the pulsating sensual music beneath his vocal line shows us the allure of Alexandria and the conflicting emotions it arouses in him.
He's clearly uncomfortable here, even though Nicias welcomes him with open arms. Nicias reveals that he is, in fact, Thaïs's current lover. He's purchased her company for the week, and this is their final day together. He laughs when Atanael informs him of his mission, but says Thaïs will arrive soon after a performance. And Nicias has his slaves help Atanael dress for the party.
And there's a witty quartet as the two young women notice how attractive Atanael is beneath his rough attire and demeanor. Nicias urges him not to take offense at their teasing and their laughter.
Atanael prays that his soul is armed against temptation. And finally, Thaïs arrives.
Now, Massenet gives Thaïs quite the diva entrance, a buildup of exotic-sounding harmonies and percussion, a chorus of admirers, all coming to a halt as she appears.
She has a tender little duet with Nicias as they celebrate the week they've shared, but acknowledge that it's ending. They sing, "Tomorrow I will be but a name to you." Now, Thaïs notices Atanael brooding, and he immediately tells her what he's there to preach: mortification of the flesh and penitence.
She answers in a sultry, insinuating tone, "What makes you so severe? Man is made for love." An ensemble ensues as everyone picks up Thaïs's melody and urges Atanael to join in the festivities.
As they taunt him, Atanael has a final outburst, declaring to Thaïs he will come to her home to bring her salvation.
And Thaïs ends the act with a triumphant, "I see," as she answers, "Dare to come to me, you who defy Venus."
In order of vocal appearance, we'll hear Jung Chul Cha as Nicias's servant and Gerald Finley as Atanael. The slaves, Crobille and Myrtal, are France Belmar in her network broadcast debut, and Megan Marino. Nicias is Jean-François Borras, and Thaïs is Eileen Perez. Emmanuel Villaume conducts.
Now, the first thing we'll hear in this scene is Massenet's marvelous orchestral evocation of Alexandria, a complete contrast to the desert atmosphere we just came from. We really get a sense of the grandeur and the beauty of this city. Listeners might detect even a hint of Wagner, whom Massenet greatly admired, in the majestic-sounding horn figures.
Right. Well, the set is an opulent room in Nicias's house. The walls are a deep turquoise, and there's gold everywhere, the palm trees, the latticework. Thaïs herself wears a shimmering golden gown, her hair falling in long golden curls.
Se il cielo è tapire, come che rosso alle siene come qua. l'ami de ton maître et je veux lui parler à l'instant. Pour laisser mon Dieu, frappe si tu le veux, puis avertis ton maître. Va.
Semblable à la bête qu'à l'homme. Embrasse-moi et sois le bienvenu. Tu quittes le désert, tu nous reviens.
Onisias, je ne deviens que pour un heure, que pour un jour.
Dis-moi qui peut,
Odysseas, tu connais cette comédienne. Thaïs, la courtisane.
Certes, je la connais, pour mieux dire, elle est mienne, encore pour un jour. J'ai vendu pour elle mes vignes, et ma dernière terre, et mon dernier moulin, et composé 3 livres d'élégies. Et cela ne compte pour rien. Je voudrais la fixer, que je perdrais ma peine. Son amour est léger, fuyant comme un rêve. Qu'attends-tu d'elle?
Veux la ramener à Dieu.
Mon pauvre ami, crains d'offenser Vénus dont elle est la prêtresse.
Je veux la ramener à Dieu. J'arracherai Thaïs à ses amours immondes, et je la donnerai pour épouse au Jésus, pour entrer dans un monastère. Thaïs va me suivre aujourd'hui.
Crains d'offenser Vénus, la puissante déesse. Elle se vengera.
Dieu me protégera. Où puis-je voir cette femme?
Ici même, pour la dernière fois, elle y doit souper avec moi en très joyeuse compagnie. Elle joue aujourd'hui en sortant du théâtre. Elle viendra.
Prête-moi donc, ami, quelques robes d'Asie, afin que dignement je puisse figurer à ce festin que tu vas lui donner.
Grobille et Myrtale, mes chers, hâtez-vous de parler, mon bon Nathanaël. Je vais donc te revoir brillant comme autrefois.
Mis en plainte à l'enfer des armes contre lui.
Philosophe orgueilleux, l'âme humaine est fragile.
Je ne crains pas l'orgueil quand le ciel me conduit.
Il est jeune, il est beau. Sa barbe d'empire, ses yeux sont pleins de feu. C'est beau donc, mais c'est bien. Je sens trop poser les bras levés. Tes mains, donne tes bras, tes doigts. Il est jeune, il est beau, ses yeux sont pleins de feu. Il est jeune, il est beau. La robe maintenant, de ce noir si lisse.
Ah, femme, pour cela, jamais.
Soit, soit. Cache-tes rigueux sous cette robe sourde.
Ne t'offense pas de la raillerie, ne baisse pas devant elle les yeux, admire plutôt t'offense pas de la langue ne blesse pas ton plaisir à Garde-toi bien, voici ta terrible ennemie. Thaïs, Aristotile, Caricates, Dorion, mes hôtes, mes amis, et Dieu soit avec vous. Sa sainte doctrine
enseigne-t-il
le mépris de la chair, l'amour de la douleur, l'austère pénitence.
Passe ton chemin, je ne crois que
Ne blasphème pas! ivresse. Non, ici je me tais, mais il est pécheresse. J'irai dans ton palais te porter le salut, et je vaincrai l'enfer en triomphant de toi.
Thaïs dares Athanaël to try to save her soul. That was Act One of Massenet's Thaïs, a performance from last November, coming to you from the Metropolitan Opera House in New York City. We just heard Eileen Perez in the title role, Gerald Finley as Athanaël, and Jean-François Borras as Nicias, with Emmanuel Villaume conducting the Met Orchestra and chorus.
Now, to clarify, this story is set in Roman Egypt, hence Thaïs referring to the goddess Venus. When earlier, Nicias said to Athanaël, "Beware of offending Venus. She will be avenged." A bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah, and all of that sets the stage for the confrontation in Act Two. And that's coming up after this intermission. I'm Mary Jo Heath. Commentator Ira Sif is with me. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear from our Thaïs soprano Eileen Perez, and also from mezzo-soprano Anita Rachvelishvili, who's going to be starring in Verdi's Il Trovatore here at the Met.
And now a Met cameo. For someone who keeps a low profile, John Fisher is everywhere.
I'm involved in the planning and the casting. I'm in constant contact with the conductor and the director. All the music rehearsals with the singers.
As assistant general manager in charge of music administration, Fisher leads an army of pianists, coaches, prompters, and others.
Most of the time, I'm halfway up the auditorium, listening to the balance and how it is all coming out together in the hall, and that's the responsibility of the music staff in general.
Singers rave about working with him, and the feeling is mutual.
I love working with singers. I love coaching singers. I always talk to every singer who comes in, and I said, look, it looks a huge, huge space. It is a huge, huge space. Just release and trust your technique and your support and release it. And you'll get right to the back of the house. Any colour you want to sing, we'll hear it at the back.
In his student days, Fisher majored in composition and musicology. Opera was just another assignment, until
I got involved with opera in that level by going to hear the Ring 4 times. The Ring cycle was being done in Scotland, where I studied. And I guess I got a little bit interested in it.
Eventually, he went on to work at La Scala, La Fenice, Deutsche Grammophon, the Welsh National Opera. But he didn't hesitate when, in the 1990s, the Met invited him to manage its music making.
When you've got all the elements together, great conductor, this wonderful orchestra and chorus, where you're going to find better. And then these fantastic operas, the best cast you can imagine, and then you sit out and you listen, and it all washes over you, and that's very exciting.
John Fisher, in charge of music administration at the Metropolitan Opera. For the Met, I'm John Bischoff.
We're coming to you from the Metropolitan Opera with Massenet's Thaïs, a performance from November. As we mentioned, Eileen Perez was singing the role of Thaïs for the first time.
And we're looking forward to hearing her in another French role later this season as Gounod's Juliette. But that's a role she sung before. To debut a role at the Met is very brave.
Yes, it is. Well, I got to speak with her back in the fall. She told me she'd been waiting to play Thaïs for a while, but that learning the role held a few surprises.
I really thought I had a sense of Massenet's writing from hearing performance of La Navarrese while in school at the Academy of Vocal Arts, and also having sung Manon by Massenet. I thought I knew him, and I love him. But this piece, wow, what a Massenet we're hearing. I know it's rarely performed, and I can see why. It's very delicate. It requires a lot of characterization and nuance and choice, and in the way that isn't just notated in the music. There's a sense of the drama that has to be present at every turn of all of the musical lines. It requires nuanced performances from everyone. And that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Now, you said you'd been looking forward to this since you sang Massenet's Manon about 7 years ago or something.
Yes.
What is it about Massenet's music, sort of in a general way, that just grabs you?
I think it's the charm and the writing avec charme, avec élan. There's an elegance and an effervescent youthfulness to singing in French, but especially his music. And it feels cinematic. As a singing actress, you can make a decision, and every time you take a breath, you already have to have in mind the image and the word or the idea that you're trying to bring across. I think that's what attracted me to it, that you could make a new choice. And that these choices, when you make them, you have to be very well aware musically where you are. So I think it's that it requires the highest sense of vocalism, musicianship, and also you have to be allowing others to play with it as well.
You mentioned to me that this lady goes on quite a journey. Tell us about that.
It feels like a pilgrimage. This is a courtesan, but it's in a different world. So it's not the rejected, outcast courtesan that we know in La Traviata or in other pieces. This is a woman who represents the height of hedonism, but of pleasure and voluptuousness that is revered and sought after and almost goddess-like. The gold that she wears, for Egyptian culture was like having the flesh of the gods to wear gold. So to go from that moment, and when we see her alone in the aria where she addresses the mirror, Dis-moi que je suis belle, she speaks about eternity. And you can hear the way Massenet writes, éternellement. It's as if every syllable of that word is desperately trying to hold on to time passing. It's stopping time. She's frightened of death, but she's smart enough to realize what her world that she has conquered, how into nothingness it will be when she changes and she gets older. So I think that we see a character so different from other heroines in the repertoire. It's not about loving another man. It's about what is next for her. What is eternity and how do you hold on to it? And is it something tangible? I never thought about the last aria. It's after he calls her Sainte Thaïs that those words just transform her. It's like having a transfiguration of a human being who used to hold on to all the things in this world but never felt free, reaching a moment where she is more whole and more satisfied than she could have ever imagined.
Eileen Perez, who's singing the title role in this broadcast of Massenet's Thaïs.
As we said, this is a role that's always lured divas from its earliest days. And Massenet wrote it for the young American soprano Sybil Sanderson, with whom he was quite infatuated. Unfortunately, she had a bit of a wardrobe malfunction at the opera's premiere, and the scandal rather overshadowed the opera.
Oh my. Well, fortunately, other divas rescued the opera not too long after. Well, in just a couple of days here at the Met, Verdi's Il Trovatore will return to our stage. In the role of the vengeful gypsy Azucena, we have mezzo-soprano Anita Rachvelishvili. She first took on this part at Covent Garden just last season and won raves. When I sat down with her recently, she talked about how the vocal demands compare to those of her signature role, opera's other famous gypsy.
You know, it feels much more comfortable than Carmen because my voice been sounding dramatic since I was 25, 24 years old. Even if I'm young, my vocality, my range, I feel much more comfortable in Verdi roles. And I think Verdi is perfect for mezzos because it's written perfectly. It's exactly like learning a technique, an Italian old technique, bringing it in alive. It's something that is very fascinating for me.
So to fill in our listeners a little bit, Azucena is a gypsy. Long ago, she saw her mother burned at the stake as a witch by the Count di Luna, and now her son, I'm using that in quotes, Manrico, and the Count's son are mortal enemies, and she is still obsessed with revenge. So Verdi originally thought of Azucena as the main character.
Yeah.
Do you?
Of course, Il Trovatore is an amazing name, and if you look, Manrico actually is the main character, but everything happens around Azucena. And she is the most complicated character in the opera because she saw her mother dying in front of her eyes. And then for revenge, she takes the Count's child, brings him to burn, and she burns by mistake her own child. So that woman is completely crazy. I guess nobody can be normal after this kind of stuff.
I would think not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she raises this boy. That's why she's very fascinating for me because she could love that boy. She could raise him as a good man, love him like a mother, and at the same time feel that pain all the time. Seeing him is constant pain for her. So she's very, very interesting character.
Wow, and we hear about that in her tour de force opening scene, starting with the aria Stride la Vampa. Can you talk about that a little?
That one has always been difficult because you hear Stride la Vampa so many times. And when you start singing it, it feels like you're singing it again and it's nothing new. So I started to do my research and to find a way to sing it differently. And actually, I discovered that that was the easiest thing in the world. You just follow the score. You don't listen to anybody. You follow exactly what Verdi written on the score. It's all on the piano. I need to sing everything very soft on piano, very, like, never giving too much voice. Like she is just hallucinating, just talking with herself. Yes, of course, all the people are listening, but every time it's happening like that. She's the crazy gypsy of the gypsy camp. So every time she tells the story, yeah, again, oh my God, she's telling it again. So she knows that, and she tells that all the time. Every time she wants to send her pain out, she tells that story. But this time she was kind of trying to calming herself. And then sometimes this anger comes out when she sings forte, you know. And when I try to do this way, exactly how it's written, all the dynamics are written on the aria. There are so many. So if you do every single dynamic, it's very fascinating.
So Verdi laid it all out for you, and you just have to figure out
how to do
bring it to life.
Yeah, exactly.
That was mezzo-soprano Anita Rachvelishvili, who's opening on Monday as Azucena in Verdi's Il Trovatore.
Really looking forward to hearing her take on this amazing, rich role.
Yeah, me too. She'll be starring alongside Maria Agresta, Young Hoon Lee, and Quinn Kelsey, conducted by Marco Armiliato. Il Trovatore will be our broadcast in 2 weeks. We'll be back with Act 2 of Massenet's Thaïs in just a moment.
It's really unusual that the most recognizable tune is in an instrument rather than a voice.
Met Orchestra concertmaster David Chan has played countless solos in operas, but the meditation from Thaïs is unique. The first time he was asked to play it was in concert.
I was like, I've heard every fellow violin student play it when I was young. It seems a little sentimental, and I don't know if it's for me. Now, I think it's kind of become my calling card, and I love it every time I do it.
Massenet first introduces the melody between scenes, at the moment of Thaïs's spiritual transformation.
It almost takes on a dimension more than just an instrumental solo. It almost functions like a character. As a violinist, you're always going to be a little bit preoccupied with playing with the most beautiful sound that you can. But something about playing it in the context of the opera, it does translate the story.
After Chan's solo in Act 2, Massenet has him play the melody again with this section, and finally, you could say, as part of a trio.
The conflict and drama between the two main characters is what the meditation is tied up with. So it's appropriate that for their final duet, it comes back. But I think he also just knew a winner when he found one.
David Chan, Met concertmaster and today's violin soloist in Massenet's Thaïs. I'm Mary Jo Heath with commentator Ira Siff at the Metropolitan Opera. We're about to hear Act 2 of Massenet's Thaïs, a performance from last November. Ira, let's talk through what happens. The first scene takes place in Thaïs's boudoir after the party. She's alone, and we see that she's troubled by the emptiness of her life. She sings what's known as the mirror aria, Dis-moi que je suis belle, pleading with the mirror to tell her that she'll be beautiful forever.
In the middle of the aria is a section where she imagines herself aging, losing the beauty that means everything to her. As Eileen Perez said, when the opening melody returns, it's intensified, as Thaïs begs Venus for reassurance. Her phrases rise to a climactic high D on the word éternellement, eternally.
And then Athanaël arrives. The rest of this scene is comprised of their duet, their emotional battle.
Well, Athanaël's music reflects his assurance and his calm, but there's also pride and pomposity.
He says he offers her a kind of love that is new to her. Thaïs mocks him, saying, "You've come too late. I know all forms of love." But when he talks about eternal life for her soul, she's struck. These words resonate with her, and she asks him to tell her more about this new love. But he suddenly finds himself struggling against his own physical desire for her.
At this point, they each pray, he to God to resist the lure of her beauty, she to Venus in a seductive incantation.
Athanaël rallies, telling Thaïs bluntly that he has come from the desert to denounce her way of life, which he refers to as a sort of death.
And her music becomes fearful and defensive. She says it's not her fault she's beautiful, and she begs him for mercy.
Once again, Athanaël offers Thaïs eternal life, and she begins to yield. But just then, we hear Nicias, who has come for his final night with her. Thaïs becomes hysterical, declaring, "I will remain Thaïs the courtesan."
She dissolves into peals of laughter mixed with sobs as Athanaël leaves. But we sense that she is ready for a transformation, and that transformation is represented by the orchestral interlude called the Meditation, arguably Massenet's most famous piece. It features a ravishing violin solo that expresses both calm and yearning.
And the chorus can be heard softly in the accompaniment to this gorgeous melody. We can imagine Thaïs going through all the emotions this piece depicts. And by the next scene, she has decided to go with Athanaël and enter a convent. He orders her to burn down her house and everything in it.
And Thaïs has a moving solo within their duet in which she begs Athanaël to allow her to keep her little statue of Eros, the god of love.
She says Eros was not to blame for her going astray. It was her misunderstanding of Eros's message of what love is. But Athanaël refuses when he discovers the statue was a gift from Nicias. Nicias and his friends, meanwhile, are still carousing. He's won a fortune at gambling and shows up at her house to celebrate with entertainment from a dancer and a singer. But then the people learn that Thaïs is leaving the city, and they see the flames coming from her house. They turn on Athanaël in fury, ready to kill him. Nicias distracts the mob by tossing money at them, and this allows Thaïs and Athanaël to escape as the act ends. In Act 2, we'll hear in order of vocal appearance Eileen Perez as Thaïs, Gerald Finley as Athanael, and Jean-François Borras as Nicias. France Belmar and Megan Marino are Krobil and Myrtal. The violin solo during the meditation scene is played by concertmaster David Chan. The solo dancer during the ballet is Serena Nicole, and Deanna Braywick in her network broadcast debut is La Charmeuse. Emmanuel Villaume is conducting the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and Chorus in this performance from the fall, November the 11th, 2017. The curtain opens on Thaïs's boudoir with deep turquoise-colored walls and a large bed in the center. She's dressed in a long, flowing gown of deep, bright pink. After the meditation, we shift to outside the house, which has an ornate golden door.
serai plus douce. Non, non, faut-il y croire? Toi, Vénus, réponds-moi de mentir. Vénus, réponds-moi, ça me termine. Vénus, invisible et présente. Vénus, enchantement de l'eau. Vénus, réponds-moi, réponds-moi. Dis-moi que je suis belle et que je serai
Thaïs, et je vais te le dire. Mais je t'aime, non comme tu l'entends. Ah, je t'aime d'esprit, je t'aime en vérité. Fleurir, il songe d'une brève nuit. Cette félicité qu'aujourd'hui je t'apporte,
Je suis à toi.
Et tu m'es friand, si l'œuvre va passer. Seigneur, Seigneur, fais que son radieux visage soit comme voilé. Devant moi.
Vénus, invisible et présente.
Pitié, Seigneur.
Vénus, enchantement
Que la force de ces charmes ne triomphe pas de ma volonté.
et blancheur de la neige. Vénus, tu sens
Je suis à Canaël, loin d'Aquinoï, je viens du sein des airs, et je maudis la chair, et je maudis l'âme qui te possède, et me voici devant toi, comme devant ton nom. Et je te dis, Thaïs, lève-toi, lève-toi.
ne me fais pas de mal. Que me veux-tu? Non! Par pitié, tais-toi. Par pitié, tais-toi.
si longtemps. Et conseil jusqu'au jour, j'attendrai ta venue. du repos se lève.
Que faut-il faire?
Au loin d'ici, vers l'Occident, il est un monastère où des femmes élies vivent pareilles à des anges dans un parfait recueillement. Pauvres, pour ici les airs, modestes pour Dieu les regarde, chastes pour Dieu les épouse. C'est là que je te conduirai à leur pieuse mère Aline. Je te consacrerai et la servante la plus pure du Christ. Là, je t'enfermerai dans l'étroite cellule jusqu'au jour où Jésus te viendra délivrer. Va, n'en doute pas, il viendra lui-même, et quelques saillements dans la chair de ton âme, quand tu sentiras sur tes yeux se poser ses doigts de lumière, afin d'en essuyer ses pleurs. Mais d'abord anéantis-je qui fit l'impure Thaïs. Au palais, et richesse, tous ceux qui condamnent ta honte, brûle tout, anéantis tout.
Qu'il en soit ainsi. Je ne veux rien garder de mon passé, rien que son nom. Cette image d'ivoire, cet enfant, mon travail antique et merveilleux. Cette rose, c'est l'amour, considère mon père, à
anéanti. Et tout le reste, à la flamme, à la vire, tiens, Thaïs, et tout ce qui fit toi, retourne à la poussière, à l'éternel oubli. Que tout ce qui fit toi, retourne à la poussière, à l'éternel oubli. Suivez-moi tous, amis. La nuit est partie. Venez, venez. Que je m'en rendu 30 fois le prix dont je payais la beauté de Thaïs. Donc, réjouissons-nous encore, encore, encore. À mes côtés, 3000 et toi, 1000 thalles. Voilà l'incomparable. Prends la lyre, Chromile, et toi, prends la cithare, militare. Et toutes deux chanter le cantique de la beauté.
Celle qui vient est plus belle que l'orgueil de sa voix, que
cette ville.
Thaïs, tu nous quitterais, est-ce possible?
Ma fille, crains de mourir, si tu touches celle-ci, elle est sacrée, elle est la part de Dieu. Passage,
Nicias distracts the people of Alexandria with money so that Thaïs and Nathanael can leave behind the city and the decadent life it represents forever. That was Act 2 of Massenet's Thaïs, coming to you from the Metropolitan Opera. It starred Eileen Perez, Gerald Finley, and Jean-François Borras. Emmanuel Villaume conducted this performance from last November. I'm Mary Jo Heath, and commentator Ira Siff is here with me.
And that's the last we'll hear from Nicias. You know, he's a very sympathetic character, but from here on out, the drama will really zero in on Thaïs and Nathanael.
Coming up in this intermission, we're going to hear from Maestro Emmanuel Villaume and from our Nathanael baritone Gerald Finley. Stay with us. Here's a preview of this Saturday's matinee broadcast, live from the stage of the Metropolitan Opera. Giacomo Puccini's intense tragedy, Tosca. The unforgettable drama of three characters caught in a fatal junction of love and hate in the eternal city of Rome. Sonia Yoncheva is Tosca, the diva who arouses passions on stage and beyond. Vittorio Grigolo is her lover, Mario Cavaradossi, an idealist in art and politics. And Željko Lučić is their nemesis, Baron Scarpia, prime enforcer of a corrupt system. Emmanuel Villaume leads the Met Chorus and Orchestra in one of the pillars of the operatic repertory, Tosca, this Saturday's matinee broadcast live from the Met. I'm Mary Jo Heath at the Metropolitan Opera, and we're in the second intermission of Thaïs by Jules Massenet, with a libretto by Louis Gallet, based on the novel by Anatole France. The production is by John Cox, with costumes for the role of Thaïs by Christian Lacroix, lighting by Dwayne Schuler, and choreography by Sarah Jo Slate. The production is a gift of Mercedes and Sid Bass. This Thaïs production was originally created by Lyric Opera of Chicago. The chorus master is Donald Palumbo. Musical preparation is by Donna Ratchick, Howard Watkins, J. David Jackson, and Leora Maurer. The assistant stage directors are Bruno Ravella, Gregory Keller, and Kathleen Smith-Belcher. The stage band conductor is Gregory Buchhalter, and the prompter, Donna Ratchick. The stage manager is Gary Dietrich. Well, Ira, Thaïs had its run back in November, but our listeners are getting a Maestro Emmanuel Villaume doubleheader. This archival broadcast today and Puccini's Tosca live next week.
You know, it's interesting because these operas were written in the same general era, and people often think of some of Massenet's works as French verismo.
Well, I got to speak with Maestro Villaume in the fall about Massenet, who wrote such a wide range of operas.
I would say for him, any material that's going to make great theater is going to make great music. And that's probably what interested him in Thaïs. He loved the novel of Anatole France because that would provide for him an incredibly intense occasion to showcase his use of religious music, or sometimes his abuse of religious theme and music. So you have everything. You have the devil, and you have God, you have sensuality, you have the scenes, and you have the saints. And so you don't have to really choose. The description of the scene, the description of the incredible feast that can happen in some houses, that's also very interesting to a composer. So that tension between what's divine and what's devilish, what's saint and what is really sensual and even sexual is amazing material for a poet. And that's what he is. He's a poet of music, he's a poet of theater. Like Puccini, like Verdi, he loves his heroines. And is one of those men who has an incredible sympathy for women and who understand the human soul first and foremost through the journey of these women, through their tragic lives. And so for him, it's the occasion to express the human soul in all its contradiction, the life in all its aspiration, its beauty, its mystery, its danger. And so from that point of view, it's an absolute masterpiece.
Oh, it really is. You know, we can hear the two sides of the music. Is there a moment where they kind of collide?
Right. The collision, I don't know, but the transformation of Thaïs happens during the so-called meditation moment. She goes from courtesan to literally a saint through the work of this monk. He does convert her, but in the process, he falls madly in love with her and he loses his own faith. At the end, you have this beautiful theme of the meditation, which is a religious theme that she is singing as she is dying and ascending to the heaven. And he's telling her, this is not true. God doesn't exist. Only love exists. And he's kind of screaming that to her, which is quite awesome and very difficult actually to put together because his interjections are not logical with the theme in general. But you don't have, let's say, a moment where you have the voluptuous music of Thaïs and at the same time the religious music of Athanaël, although you could argue that the meditation in itself has an incredible sensuality. And the mysticism that is expressed here with a certain femininity is in itself, I would say, maybe religious sensuality, if there is such a thing, which is the specialty of Massenet.
Emmanuel Villaume, who conducted the performance of Thaïs that we're hearing today.
You know, Massenet's fascination with religious eroticism went back a ways. His first success was his oratorio, Marie Magdalene, incidentally also to a text by Louis Gallet, who wrote the libretto for Thaïs. And later there was Hérodiade, his opera dealing with the story of Salome and John the Baptist.
As Maestro Villaume said, it was a subject matter that seemed to play to his strengths. Well, I also spoke with Gerald Finley back in the fall, our Athanael. We talked about the arc of this character, starting with his music at the very beginning of the opera.
Passionate,
Yeah.
zealous, really. I mean, he's obviously committed to the cause. It announces him as a sort of a quasi-heroic, lyric, passionate warrior, really, on the cause of conversion, and he has his objective, and Thaïs is it.
He goes through this 180-degree transformation, and how does his music reflect that?
Well, it's interesting that, along the course of the journey, if you like, he actually manages to convince her to at least follow him into the desert towards this convent where he's going to deliver her. And on the way, he has to sort of cause her to burn all her things, which is very passionate and extremely sort of brutal almost. And they reach a point in the desert where her feet are bleeding from the journey. He's pushed her so hard, and suddenly the music transforms into this sort of harp music, light lyrical, sort of fluttering violins and flutes. And suddenly he becomes a wonderful lyric baritone after being sort of a held in baritone for the first part, and suddenly he's a lyric baritone. And that's a great challenge for a singer, to kind of rein in all that amazing sort of heroic stuff. I think Massenet does a wonderful job in sort of guiding the passion. The score is marked full of very particular characterizations of the music, with violence, with roughness, with great tenderness, with great passion. It's all there in the score.
Mm-hmm.
And so he had a very clear idea as to this journey. I think we just need to follow it.
So, as an artist who sings a wide spectrum of music, what do you like to bring out in French romantic repertoire? Or what does it bring out in you? Maybe that's the other way.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to feel that this particular, it's the French equivalent of the Puccini. It's the, real concrete drama. And I love the sweeping lines. The language itself is very forward. It's very good for singing, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
It allows us non-native speakers to investigate that part of the voice, which can be enriched, if you like, by the language.
Uh-huh.
So that's quite nice. And I've always enjoyed French music. Ravel and Debussy are part of my song repertoire, as well as the Pélias and Mélisande that I was doing here before.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it quite well, and I love it as a piece. I mean, I'm very partial to the French Romantic.
Well, you start here last season as Guillaume Tell, and that was one that really stayed with us all through the season as being one of the highlights of the whole Met year last year. He was a real hero, but I understand you enjoy playing flawed characters as well.
Well, that just makes them interesting. I think for me, as an artist, yes, there are musical challenges in whatever piece you're doing. Part of my love of being an opera singer is to examine the shade of the bright characters and to look at the bright side of the dark. Make them interesting.
That was Gerald Finley, who's singing the role of Athanael in our broadcast today.
We heard him mention the Oasis scene we're about to hear. It was actually not in Massenet's original version of the opera. It was added in a revision a few years after the premiere. I cannot imagine the opera without it, because it illuminates such a crucial point in the journey of these characters.
Yeah, it's really a very special, quiet moment. I'm Mary Jo Heath, here with commentator Ira Siff. The third and final act of Thaïs will begin soon. It's in 3 scenes, and the first one is this Oasis scene, so let's talk through it. Thaïs and Athanael are on their way to the convent. Athanael is forcing her to walk through the desert to atone for her sins. She's completely exhausted, and he takes pity on her. And this is the moment Gerald Finley was talking about. They pause to rest at an oasis near the convent. Athanael brings Thaïs fruit and water, and they have a lovely duet here, full of tenderness towards each other.
It's the only moment in the opera in which these two characters sing in emotional and musical harmony. They share a gentle melody as their feelings meet for this instant before their paths will ultimately take them in opposite directions. Thaïs towards the spiritual, Athanael towards his more earthly love for her.
Even as they are resting, the nuns from the convent approach them, and Athanael entrusts Thaïs into the care of the abbess, Albina.
And when Thaïs tells him, "Farewell forever, we'll meet again in the heavenly city," she floats a soft high A pianissimo, and the meditation theme returns on the strings.
It's a stunning effect. Athanael watches Thaïs enter the convent and is suddenly overcome by the painful realization that he will never see her again. We'll hear in order of vocal appearance Eileen Perez as Thaïs, Gerald Finley as Athanael, and Sarah Cowden in her network broadcast debut as Albina, the abbess of the convent. Emmanuel Viome conducts the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra and Chorus in this performance from November the 11th, 2017. When the curtain rises, we are in the desert, and the white walls of the convent are visible to the right. Thaïs now wears a long, dark robe, her golden hair shorn off. She stumbles as she walks, barely able to keep going.
Anicias, Dieu l'avait pourtant formé pour qu'il devint son tabernacle. Et maintenant que tu connais la vérité, tu ne peux plus unir tes lèvres, tu ne peux plus joindre tes mains sans qu'on se voie le dégoût de toi-même. Marche, expire. Les gouttes de sang coulent de ses pieds blancs. Ma pitié s'émeut à mon âme. Pauvre enfant, pauvre femme, j'ai trop prolongé cette épreuve. Pardonne-moi, ô ma sœur, ô sainte Thaïs, ô sainte, très sainte Thaïs.
Marchons maintenant.
Pas encore. L'eau fraîche des fruits prendront quelque force. Attends que je descende vers les puits, que j'aille vers la halte hospitalière. Vois là-bas ces cellules blanches, c'est le couvent d'Albine où nous allons. Le but est proche, espère, prie. Providence divine, voici la vénérable Albine, et ses sœurs apportant le pain noir du courant. Elles viennent vers nous et marchent en priant. Seigneur soit avec toi, Sainte Albine, j'apporte à ta ruche divine la paix que j'ai par la grâce d'en haut trouvé un jour perdu en un chemin sans fleurs. Dans le creux de ma main, très frêle, je l'ai prise, de mon souffle je l'ai réchauffée. Et voici que pour la consacrer à Dieu, je te la donne. Ainsi soit-il. Je n'irai pas plus loin. Lire ma fille. Mon œuvre est accomplie. Adieu, chère Thaïs. Reste recluse en l'étroite cellule. Fais pénitence et prie à chaque heure pour moi. Pécheresse gagner à l'éternel amour. Que son visage est beau, elle rénonce allégresse émane de ses yeux. Pour toujours. Je ne la verrai plus. Je ne la verrai plus.
Nathanael realizes with anguish that he will never see Thaïs again. That was Act 3, Scene 1 of Massenet's Thaïs, and we're about to hear the opera's final two scenes. We begin back at the monastery on a stormy evening. Palamon comments that it's been 20 days since Nathanael returned from his journey with Thaïs, and that he's had nothing to eat or drink in all this time. Nathanael confesses to the elder monk that he desires Thaïs physically.
Nathanael has a solo here that's like a release of his pent-up desire and guilt as he repeats her name with increasing intensity.
Palamon laments that Nathanael ever left the monastery in the first place. Nathanael falls asleep, exhausted, but his sleep is disturbed by visions. The first is an erotic vision of Thaïs.
She even addresses him as she did when they first met, and then she breaks into strident laughter, her voice climbing higher and higher.
But this is interrupted by a second vision in which voices announce that Thaïs is dying. Nathanael, in despair, decides he must see her again. He rushes out into the storm to make the journey to the convent.
Massenet pulls out all the stops in this orchestral storm interlude, which also reflects Nathanael's emotional turbulence. When the storm music dies away, the meditation melody appears again, like the sun breaking through the clouds.
And we're at the convent for the opera's final scene. The nuns are praying as Thaïs is now close to death. Nathanael is permitted to be alone with her once more. This final duet is so moving, Ira. They are in two completely different worlds. Thaïs is at peace.
Yes, again, under her vocal line, we hear that meditation as she recalls their journey and how his words saved her soul.
But Nathanael desperately blurts out that he was lying, that nothing matters except human love, and he loves her. Thaïs, her soul already on the way to heaven, does not hear him.
In a sumptuously beautiful melody, her vocal line soars twice to high Ds. And these phrases mirror the meditation, but voiced in a way that reflects Thaïs's religious ecstasy.
As she dies, she sees heaven opening to her. and Nathanael is left alone, completely shattered.
And the opera ends with his agonized cry for pity.
In these final two scenes, we'll hear in order of vocal appearance David Pitzinger as Palamon, Gerald Finley as Nathanael, Eileen Perez as Thaïs, and Sarah Cowden as Albina. Emmanuel Viaume conducts. We open again on the monks in the desert, but in the second scene, we are within the convent walls. Thaïs is framed like a religious icon wearing a white gown, seated on an elevated altar draped with flowers and candles laid before her.
Celle qui fut l'impure Thaïs, une orgueilleuse joie si je triomphe. Je suis revenu vers ce désert de paix. Eh bien, à moi, la paix m'aurait-elle. Enfin j'ai flagellé ma chair, enfin je l'ai meurtrie. Le démon me possède, la beauté de la femme entre mes visions. Je ne vois que Thaïs, Thaïs, Thaïs. n'est pas elle. Cette ni fini, c'est fini, ça se termine. Toutes les splendeurs et toutes les voluptés, en une seule créature, je ne vois que Thaïs, Thaïs, Thaïs. Ne t'avais-je pas dit que nous mêlons jamais, mon fils, aux gens du siècle, craignant les pièges de l'esprit? Oh, pourquoi nous as-tu quittés? moi de la saisir, la garder. Je la veux. Je vais te le prendre, je vais te le prendre. Sois à moi, sois à moi, à moi, à moi, sois à moi. J'ai parlé, je t'ai menti.
Voilà,
Je t'ai menti.